Right now, boom goes the Senate. Democrats, frustrated by filibusters, detonate the so-called nuclear option. But will it make the Senate better or worse in the short and the long run? And then, Mayor Bloomberg leaves the president behind for Mayor-elect Mr. de Blasio a balanced budget. But the incoming mayor still has a slew of challenges ahead. We've got the de Blasio to-do list. And later, justice or tipping the scales? A Kennedy cousin goes free from his murder conviction while A-Rod storms out of the arbitration and on to radio. We're going to break down both high-profile cases. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thanks so much for joining us this Monday evening. Now, we start here this evening in D.C. with a dramatic move by Senate Democrats, and it comes with an even more dramatic name, the so-called nuclear option. Now, after years of complaints and months of frustration and even threats about going to this degree, Democrats today voted on a huge change to the way the Senate does business, lowering the votes needed to advance the approval process for presidential nominees to everything but the Supreme Court. Now, instead of the needed 60 votes here to break those unspoken filibusters, now a simple 50 is the vote total needed. Democrats say the GOP forced their hands, releasing this graphic showing the ratcheting up of Republican filibusters. 82 under President Obama, 86 under all presidents that came before him.
There's been unbelievable, unprecedented obstruction. For the first time in the history of our republic, Republicans have routinely used the filibuster to prevent President Obama from appointing an executive team or confirming judges.
Republicans, they call the move a Democratic overreach, and that's the stuff we can say on TV. And they also said it was done purely out of politics to be a distraction from Obamacare. They pledged revenge as they publicly seethed.
Confirm everybody, 100%. Anything less than that is obstructionism. That's what they're saying to effect. Well, let me say, we're not interested in having a gun put to our head any longer.
Now, the president, faced with a chance to finally get his appointees on the job, he tried to take on a more impartial tone.
And I just want to remind everybody, what's at stake here is not my ability to fulfill my constitutional duty. What's at stake is the ability of any president to fulfill his or her constitutional duty.
All right, let's get some perspective here from our panel. Dominic Carter, of course, here. Jonathan Yedden. Jonathan's Democratic consultant with the Advance Group and a former executive director for the Kings County Democratic Party, and Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. There's a lot of ways to read this, but also a lot of hypocrisy. I saw a soundbite from then Senator Obama when the then senator was asked about it. He went to the podium and he said, well, you can't pull the trigger on the nuclear option. This wouldn't be good for the country. It would damaging and everything else. I saw Senator Reid say, why you can't do this. This would be the death of the Senate and everything that went before it. I saw Senator McConnell saying maybe we should do this. This would be a good thing. Let's change the rules here because that's our job here, to adapt with the times and everything else. So let's just save time and say everybody's a hypocrite on this thing. But nonetheless, you cannot overestimate, Andrew, how significant a change this is. This isn't just about going from 60 to 50. This changes the whole dynamic, and this changes the whole process.
Well, every minority party complains about the filibuster process, and everybody, you're right, is hypocritical, has some dirt on them on this one. But the level of blockage that's come from the Senate Republicans has been unprecedented. I think by any objective level, it really has been. So there is a difference this go round. But the repercussions of this could be all over the place. Do they start breaking filibusters like this when it comes to individual pieces of legislation?
Well, let's just do one thing, because I saw some people who watched the president earlier today, and they thought, well, all of a sudden the rules change now where you can't filibuster anything anymore. That's not so. Legislation different. 60 still holds. This is about appointees, and more specifically, there are 3 or 4 appointees to the highest court in the land, right below the Supreme Court, that have been sitting there waiting here for a simple up and down vote. In effect, they're going to be pushed through, and the best way I heard it described is they're basically the farm team for Democrats for the Supreme Court when a vacancy opens historically. That's a big deal.
Well, but it's also, everybody knows Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts now.
Who you have
Obama wanted her to be the Consumer Financial Protection Commissioner, and he couldn't get her because he couldn't break through the logjam there. With this threshold here, she would be in that job and not be in the U.S. Senate right now. So this will have repercussions all the way down the line, both to that bench for the Supreme Court, but also every executive position. The question is, will it extend at some point to legislation? It's
and
not
Jonathan,
yet.
the question is payback. We don't have to go too far here to extrapolate. Next year, you got midterms. By every account here, things have changed a lot in the last 60 days with the Obamacare rollout. Sure. Democrats have a reasonable fear here that they could lose the Senate. And then what happens if they lose the presidency? We could see this on the other foot, and people saying, my God, what are you doing? Look who you're stacking the courts. Look at who you're putting and approving without even our voice. I thought this was a democracy. I thought the Senate was the saucer, the cooling agent, unlike the House, which is so volatile and temperate. We're supposed to calm things down. What does that say?
But you know, at the same time, I see the obstructionism just was at a level that was unprecedented. They needed to do things to move things forward. You worry about what happens down the road. I think what you'll see is, you know, these are positions that needed to be filled, and the public wanted movement here within the upper house. I mean, there was just so much of nothing going on that I think the way Democrats spin this come next year is, you know, we were empowering the body. It's still a majority. And we had a majority vote on these things, and that's how a lot of these things work. The House of Representatives, you go to your city council, you go back home, majority rules. Majority wins elections. And so, granted, it shouldn't be for everything. We should still retain the filibuster for certain things. This was just such, you know, trivial things in the scheme of the country's business that it needed to be done.
But Dominic, you can also read this. That's the medium and the long-term view about how that could impact stuff. But what does this say about what the president thinks he's going to get through? Now, everybody knows how much of a clown car the House is. The Senate's not much better, but if there was chances to get stuff through, think about what the Senate hit the brakes on, at least, with the debt limit and shutting the government down. They were the agents who at least had a little bit of sanity. You could work across us. Immigration, you had the Lindsey Grahams and the McCain that were trying to work out a deal. My read of what happened today was everything these guys said, but the president must think he's not going to get anything through anymore. And to do that, that's a desperate sign that today is, because there's no way any vulnerable Republican is going to go across the aisle after what the Democrats did today. So I don't know if it's game, set, match on the second-term agenda right now, but it sure as heck says to me, if you thought you had a slim chance to get things through, you got zero after what happened this afternoon.
From my perspective, today is a good day for the American people. It really is. God only knows what's going to happen when Republicans take control of the Senate. Your assessment is correct that the president must believe at this point that he couldn't get anything through. So, I mean, you have a lot of dynamics going on, but as the president argued today, Richard, and this is a point that I believe bears repeating, it took his appointees, I believe judicial appointees, they have sat 2.5 times longer than the amount of the appointees from President Bush. I mean, so we're at the point where the country was almost not functioning. These are appointments that must be made.
I get it, but Andrew, if we talk about dysfunction, and we do on this show almost nightly about how bad Washington's gotten, and every poll says it, we are definitely after today going to see even more of it, even in the Senate, even more than we saw in the House. Now, the argument is, how much worse can it get? I get the argument, but if anybody thinks it's going to work better after today, they're smoking something maybe that the Toronto mayor knows about.
I mean, it'll work better for the president to get his nominees through, but in terms of passing laws, no, you're absolutely right. It won't work as well. But here's my biggest concern with it. Now the president can get more liberal or more progressive nominees through. He doesn't have to try to find somebody who's going to get some Republican votes. Does that mean he's going to, and is that good for the country? And then when the shoe's on the other foot, a Republican president who puts a nominee forward can put an extreme right-wing conservative up for any position, and as long as he's got 50 votes in the Senate, he can get that person appointed.
But let's just remember, this isn't, as we just said, just in the last 12 years. This has come up time after time. We had frustrated administrations on the Democratic and Republican side saying, you know, maybe we ought to change the rules. And always at the edge, they backed off because of the fear, not just of the unknown, but on the fear of what the other side would do. There's a reason why they backed off. Now, I agree. The problem's been on steroids under this president in the last few years. That said, though, I guess I would have voted if I had a vote. I understood that, and I would have gone along with this. But I noticed Senator Levin, a guy that we all respect here, very progressive senator out of Michigan, he voted with Republicans today because he's worried about where this goes from here, and I don't think he's crazy.
Well, it used to be that there would be senior senators who would think about the long-term impact on the body itself. Levin is one of those, but you know, because of the level of obstruction with everything else that's going on, the thought is we got to make whatever changes, whatever impact we can make right now, and that is executive appointments.
And Richard, to your point, I mean, even if the Senate came up with a deal on immigration, on guns, or whatever, we all know they have to punt to the House next, and it's not going to fly.
You're right,
no matter
Dominic,
what you come up with.
But just think about this. We got about 3 years left for this administration, and he's waving in many ways the white flag saying, hey, I already know I can't get anything to the House. I'm giving up on the Senate too. I think it says a lot. All right, when we come back on RFL, we're going to come closer to home here. Got any plans for New Year's? Well, Bill de Blasio says and does. Now, we're going to talk about the litany of things that he wants to get done, and Jonathan's going to tell us what chances he has to get it done at that. Will it be a happy 2014 for the incoming mayor? We'll get into the agenda and the probabilities right after this.